back to the main point that the fact that the Torah begins speaking about the fact that this is why Yaakov wants to give over and doesn't give it over. There's a message in that too. The fact that he wanted to do it and wasn't able to do it. You just can't keep reading. So much important information gets passed on very much in these type of stories that it's important that we have to understand, appreciate what it is that's being transmitted. And a lot of times the point's being made from the non-point, in a sense, to some degree, and that's very relevant to us, especially today. One of the things that people are waiting to hear. We spoke about this last week and other weeks as well. That you're not going to hear the words "this exile is over," and when you finally hear about it, it usually is too late at that point in time. For example, in Europe also, and before that, why did Yaakov want to give over these things, these simai? Because basically, so we would be able to recognize when events are occurring that have to do with Achros Yamin, the end of days. And the question becomes, so then why wasn't it allowed to transmit that? What's wrong with knowing that information? So before we get into that, just the Gemara's understanding what happens actually, what the reason for it, because also that's a very important part of the entire story as well. And that is that Yaakov had assumed at this point in time that whatever tikkun the brothers had to go through, they went through. Whatever happened with Yosef, he revealed himself, and he brought the family back together again down in Mitzrayim, and it was all explained. It was seen as a shkacha prati, so Baruch Hu arranged and organized the entire thing. So hopefully that was the end of it. Whatever the Jewish people had to go through until that point in time was finally undergone, and that would have rectified everything. So therefore, he felt that it'd be possible to give over this prophecy. So he began to speak, and then it was taken away from him. So the Gemara, goes on. The Torah itself doesn't fill in the blanks, just like basically, it's a non-starter. He starts talking about it, and then just, turns to the bruchas after that. And the Gemara explains that, it's Gemara Pesachim, that he turns to his sons and says, is everything okay over here? Because the fact that prophecy was taken away from me implies that somebody's not fitting, because we know that Yishmael wasn't fitting from Abraham. We know that Esau was born to Yitzchak, and maybe the same problem exists in my family too. Then maybe that's the reason why the prophecy was taken away from me, and you can't hear it. Something's not right with the Jewish people still. So the brothers come back and they say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And the Gemara says that at that point in time, Yaakov Avinu came back and said what we say today every day in the Shema, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Ve'ed, but the prophecy still doesn't come back. The Gemara, so the Torah doesn't go anywhere with it. The Gemara fills in a little bit more of the story, takes it a little bit further, right? But it doesn't, continue on to tell us what happened with the prophecy and why it was taken away. And from the Gemara, it sounds like saying the Shema was a good start, right? And Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Ve'olam Ve'ed, that's like really, confirmation. Good, you guys are right, that you're fine. The problem is not you. The problem is the prophecy itself. For some reason, Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to give up the prophecy to us. But I see everything is fine over here. Until you get to the Zohar, which explains that really, Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso Le'olam Ve'ed, what Yaakov said was not confirmation that everything was okay, but rather was more to confirm that things were not okay in the end. Because as it says in the Zohar, that just like the Shema has 25 letters, which is always an allusion to the hidden life of creation, because Yer Elokim Yehi Or, the gematria of the word Yehi is 25, so therefore we've always explained that 25 is a number that represents the light of creation that was hidden on the first day in its hidden state. 36 is a number that represents the light once it's been revealed, right? But 25 is a light while still hidden, so therefore we begin lighting the candles on the 25th day of Kislev, because the light's still hidden. But we end up with 36 candles on the 8th day, because the light's been revealed. Pesumi Nisa, lighting the menorah, reveals this light and brings it into the world. So the fact that the Shema has 25 letters, Yaakov also wanted to give Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso Le'olam 25 letters, but instead only gave it 24, because he understood that the unity, the special unity and achdus necessary in the world amongst the brothers, amongst the family, amongst Ma'aseh Bereshis, that this light should come down and complete everything which the prophecy would have been part of, was not there. And it wouldn't come until the Mishkan, in fact, was completed. The Mishkan, in fact, was built. So therefore, after the first pasuk says a Zohar, after it says V'yikra Hashem al Moshe, right? The last part of the pasuk has 25 letters. To make out for the 25 letters that Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Lamed was supposed to have, it didn't have in the end.
Where's the other 25?
In the first pasuk of Vayikra. After Vayikra Hashem Moshe, right? After that part, the last part of the pasuk is 25 letters. In place of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, because that verse is talking about the Mishkan.
Where specifically?
The first pasuk of the first
Where are the 25?
The last after it says Vayikra Hashem Moshe, the last part of the pasuk, whatever follows after that.
We don't see that it ever came up again. It has to mean something as well.
Yeah, it does. It does. As we're going to say in a second.
Where's it more of a sign?
I think it's Nun Vav Amud Aleph. I believe. I have it written down. I just used to know it by heart, and I forget.
So you're saying the last part of this particular pasuk. That's
the very first pasuk of the Yikra.
That's where the diminutive Aleph, right?
Right. Right. So it has Vayikra Moshe, right? And then after that, I think, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Yeah. From Vaydeber after Vayikra Moshe, stop there. The next part of the pasuk, Vaydeber Hashem Elav Me'ohel Moed Le'mor, is 25 letters. That the Zohar says is to make up for Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, which is interesting. Because if you look at the words Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, it has all the letters it can possibly have. There's no word like Malchuso. Had Malchuso, let's say for example, been written in Chaser, meaning one of the vavs was not written but just had the nukuda for the O sound. So then you could add a vav and give it 25 letters. But the way we actually write Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, it has all 25 letters as it is. So where are you going to put the extra letter? Not in the words themselves. Right? So I've never seen anything to explain where that extra letter would go, but it would make sense that the missing letter is a vav. And the vav actually comes at the beginning, not inside one of the words. It should really say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, U'Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso, Le'olam Ve'ed. And the reason why I say that is because the Shema itself is called the upper Yichud. That refers to the Yichud of Hashem in the upper realm, amongst the Malachim, amongst the angels. But there's no doubt whatsoever about God's unity. Nobody questions the reality of Hashem in that realm. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ve'ed is the verse that refers to the Yichud of Hashem in the world below, in our world, which basically is not so visible, which is why we whisper it, because it's more of a future reality as opposed to a present reality right now. So they're detached to a large degree. There's a yichud up there that's clear cut, but the yichud down here is only a little too because we're building towards it, but it's not quite there yet. But Yom Mashiach will be there. In which case, this reality will match that reality, and that's what it means. B'yomahu Yeshem Echad Shemo Echad. On that day, God will be one, because His oneness will be one up here and down in the world as well. So therefore, it makes sense to put the vav at the beginning to say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, which means just like He's unified up there, He's also unified in the world below. That's probably where He should have been.
So how do you explain what is it? I know people when we say it without people.
Because even then, it's only a pseudo reality, right? In other words, we're not really angels, right? It's more of a pretense. It's more of a thing that we're trying to get to, right? Where we're allowed to say it aloud because the angels look down, they see people dressed in white, but they know we're humans, and we know we're humans, and we're still doing things even out of habit. So we're not quite there yet. Because if that achdus of the upper realm on Yom Kippur came down to us, we wouldn't go back Motzi Yom Kippur and become humans once again, at least on the level that we were previously before Yom Kippur began. We'd hold on to it, and that would bring Yom Mashiach from that point onward, because it would be real to us. But it's more of a taste at that point in time than anything else. We don't really get that vav, right? And vav also is a whole concept of geula, represents number 6, Yosef, Yesod, all these things. That's what the vav is all about. So that's what it should have been. Yaakov understood that things are not quite rectified as much as we'd like to have them become rectified. That whatever went wrong by Shechem still remains to go wrong, because otherwise he wouldn't have lost the prophecy. That's what the Gemara and the Zohar combined together seem to imply. And the truth is we see a hint of that in this week's Parsha, because when the brothers come to Yosef, and they say, after Yaakov died, that he told us to tell you that you shouldn't take revenge and harm us, so Yosef cries and they cry, and then he says, Tachas Elokim Anochi, right? Am I in place of God? Can I do things to you, that God doesn't want to happen? If 10 candles could not put out one candle, Rashi explains, how can one candle put out 10 candles? Right? Where's your belief in Hashgacha Pratis? Didn't you learn anything from this whole story of my going down into Shechem and then my being sold into slavery into Mitzrayim?
You've gone too fast,
Yeah. Anochi, yeah.
Yeah. So when could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, because they've come to him and they're showing fear. They're lying, first of all, and they're showing fear. And the fear is that Yosef might take that and Rashi explains why, because when Yaakov was alive, he used to invite them down to eat with them, or up to wherever he was, to eat with them, because the family got together for these fantastic dinners. But then Yosef became concerned about who should sit at the head of the table and cause machlokas once Yaakov was gone, so he stopped inviting them. So they took it to be that Yosef still harbored negative feelings towards them, and therefore they were concerned. And they came and told Menashe to tell Yosef, and then the whole thing. But Yosef knew they were lying, because Yosef knew Yaakov would never say such a thing. He'd never be choshed Yosef that he would ever take revenge against his brothers, because he saw that Yosef understood the whole thing was Hashgacha Pratis, and they suffered enough. Right? They suffered enough at this point in time, and therefore there was no revenge to be taken. But they were worried. They were concerned. So Yosef realized that they're still thinking that some, who are you arguing with? Who are you fighting with over here? If you're real with Hashgacha Pratis, you're real with divine providence, then you know that I can't do anything to you that God doesn't want to happen. If God wants you to be harmed, what's the point of lying to me? It's going to happen anyhow. If I don't do it, someone else will do it, because Baruch Hu runs the world. If he wants it to be saved, then all the planning that I do is not going to make a difference, because he's going to protect you some way, somehow. So, where's your connection? So you could say actually that maybe the brothers thought or picked up from Parshas Vayigash, because in Parshas Vayigash, what does Yosef do? He tells them, when you stand before Paro, here's how you should do it. Right? The weaker should go first, so Paro says the weaker ones, so that way he won't put you in the army. He'll think you're too weak for the army and let you stay home and be shepherds instead, and he won't be interested in you. So what kind of a game is this? If God wants you to be in Paro's army, won't he put you there no matter what? And if God doesn't want you to be in Paro's army, so then won't he keep you out of it? Right? So what's Yosef playing a game over here? The brothers can easily say to Yosef, well, the truth is we might not have played this game, but after seeing you in Parshas Vayigash rearranging us to make sure that we act smart and we fool Paro in this whole process, we thought that maybe we have to do the same thing over here, make our Yishtadalus with you as well, and make an effort over here with you as well. So it is somewhat inconsistent. So what you have to explain basically is that what Yosef is saying to his brothers, Yosef is saying, when you're talking to Paro, you're down at Mitzrayim and you're talking to Paro, that's what you have to do. That's the way you have to behave. Why? Because when you're living amongst the Gentiles, you're living in Galus, you're under what's called Hashgacha Klalis. It's a general form of divine providence. God runs the world, he's behind everything, but he holds himself back in as much as he does not allow it to be so clear he's running the show. To make a distinction between Eretz Yisrael and the rest of the nations of the world. In Eretz Yisrael, his eye is in the land, the Pasuk says, right? He's specifically involved in Jewish history, making things happen in a very overt way. So, when you're living in Mitzrayim, you can't act as if you're living in Eretz Yisrael so much, because there's an aspect of it, but not completely, because Hakadosh Baruch Hu, is going to be forced to do an overt miracle in a place he doesn't want to do an overt miracle, so therefore you have to give him the means, like buying the lottery ticket, to get your money that God wants to give to you. Providing the means that it does the miracle, the appearance of the miracle is reduced somewhat so that people still can maintain their free will choice. That's what it's all about. But in Eretz Yisrael, the rules are different.
Yeah, but they were still Mitzrayim.
Right, 100%. But it turns out that amongst ourselves, even in Chutz La'aretz, and the truth is you can see this in Jewish communities, that even though, if you're in exile for the right reasons, right, as we've spoken about in the past, right, you're there because God wants you there. He's brought you there. He expects you to be there right now, and he's even down there with you, helping you do your job of redeeming sparks, right? If you're there for the right reasons in Mitzrayim, then basically, as we said before, the Shekhinah goes with you, which is tantamount to a piece of Eretz Israel going with you. That's why you're protected, and that's why you're successful. So Yosef says, when we talk to people in Mitzrayim to Paro, we have to deal as if we're Mitzrayim. We're talking amongst ourselves, from Jew to Jew. It's like being in Eretz Israel to some degree. It's a whole different level of Hashgacha Pratis. There's no longer Hashgacha Klalis on the same level talking to Paro. So with Paro, we have to play this game because we can't be reliant on a nace, on a miracle. But amongst ourselves, we're supposed to know what Hashgacha Pratis is all about, because for the sake of the Gentile world, for the sake of other people, for free will, it has to be maintained. So therefore, God likes to do things behind the scenes, right? But between you and I, who are supposed to be on a level where we perceive God, and we're believers in God, and everything's bitachon amuna, and it's all about, avodas Hashem and all these different things. So then, it's like we're Eretz Israel to some degree, and all the game stops, all the game playing stops.
And it's the recognition that Shekhinah was with you.
Yeah, and therefore you don't have to lie to me, he says. To Paro, we have to play a game, but to me, like you're treating me as if you're talking to Paro, it's not the same thing.
So isn't that an inconsistency when they say Baruch Shem Achosovi on Boed? Isn't that an inconsistency?
Well, that's what he says. They said, well, that's part of what Yosef, that's part of the problem. That's what Yaakov sees. That's why he says Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus and leaves out one letter, because he realizes that even though they're saying the Shema, they're not really real with it. They're not really real with it.
So like we're saying, they're aware that the Shekhinah is with them.
Right. The Shema is like theory.
Right.
It's like intellectuals, like theory. It's what we all know it's true, right? We all sit there twice a day and we say the Shema, and even as we're saying the Shema, our minds drift half the time. But even if they don't drift, we immediately leave davening. What's your Shemona Esrei like after the Shema? Is it always like clear cut and crystal and driven and close to this Baruch with all? No, it's like basically we're davening, we're doing our thing, we're saying the Shema, we're focused for the Shema. We lose that reality of the Shema very quickly in our everyday lives. Our lives are not consistent with the Shema. Because if you understood what the Shema is all about, I get this halacha sheet every day that you get by email. 2 halachas, sometimes 3 halachas. It's actually very, very good.
My name's not Yehuda. My name's not Shimon Levi. So essentially, you're on a much higher level there from the point of view of recognition of the Shekhinah, correct?
I'm
talking about when the brothers are talking to Yosef now and to their father, and they're on this level of awareness that the Shekhinah is supposed to be with them. Okay, so that Shekhinah, they may not be cognizant of it 100% of the time, but at least speaking, they're on a very high madrega, recognizing that the Shekhinah is there, and by not responding to Yosef in the way of knowing that, listen, you're gonna now, you're gonna come after us. You're gonna kill us now. Is that what you're gonna do now that our father's dead? You're gonna come after us and kill us. So you hear what I'm saying? The fact remains is that we're seeing another inconsistency here.
That's the main inconsistency.
Right.
That's what Yaakov detected is what shows up in that pasuk, and that's why Yosef cries. Right, because he's not crying because he's personally insulted. He understands where they're coming from. He's crying because he realizes, in spite of all of his efforts, remember the whole point that Yosef, the entire time with Yosef, was trying to give them hints so they would discover him. They would realize it was him. And the fact that Yosef had to reveal himself, the pasuk itself says he couldn't hold himself back any longer. So that, what do you mean he couldn't hold himself back any longer? Why should he hold himself back any longer? What was he waiting for? What was he waiting for? For them to crack?
No, when we say that, we're always concentrating on the fact that Yosef, reveals himself, Ani Yosef. But what does he do before he says Ani Yosef? Remember, he cries. That's out of a huge cry. Remember, we don't focus on that. But that's all part of the whole story. That he's crying because he realizes that the battle's over. He's lost. He's lost the battle. What he tried to accomplish, it's finished. He could not achieve it. That the guy who planned to win the race, basically, and just couldn't, run the full distance. He did everything he could possibly do to bring the brothers to full tshuva, to bring them to the level of Baruch Shem Kavod Mochved, on the proper level with the vav. That's the whole goal. The whole goal is to get that vav in there. It's amazing. This one little letter signifies so much. If only the brothers had got the level Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, that was it. That was the tikkun, and that's Yemos Mashiach right there. That one little letter, it was missing. Which is why it's all through history. This vav is so important. It represents Yosef and Mashiach and Yosef, and the Geula, and that's why there's 6-day war, and 6 is there's always a number of Geula in the end, and he couldn't achieve it because of the fact that there's the limitations. People they'll only hear what they're willing to hear, what they're ready to hear, and apparently they weren't ready to hear at that point in time. But that's really not even the main point. The main point over here is that's the way the Gemara understands it. That's the way the Zohar explains it. Why he can't give over the prophecy, right? But there's another reason why. Because if you understand why he would like to do it in the first place, and the answer is because he wants us to be able to determine when an exile comes to an end. Something we've never been able to do. 4/5 died in Makas Chosha. It is a pellet. It is an absolutely incredible thing that the Torah doesn't speak about. It's like glosses right over the entire thing. The Medrash brings it out. Basically, 4/5, 80% of the Jewish population die in Mitzrayim, in Makas Chosha, the plague of darkness. Why? Why? What happened? Why should they stay behind? Why should they not go out with Moshe Rabbeinu when so many of them? Why would they choose to remain back in Mitzrayim? Even if you want to say that now the Mitzrayim were destroyed, well, there was still Paro, there was still Mitzrayim there, basically. Even they chased after Moshe and the 1/5 that did go out. So there's certainly a significant amount of Paro's army still standing, even by the 8th and 9th plague. So it wasn't like it was a walk in Central Park. Well, it's not supposed to walk anyhow, but walk to the park to take over Mitzrayim at that point. There would still be resistance. So it wasn't like a safe thing to do. Why would they choose to stay behind? Or did they actually choose to stay behind, or they simply weren't ready to go out?
Things gotten good for them. The
better.
Slavery had stopped. Well, not good, but better. Well, comparatively good.
Absolutely.
From the slavery to...
Would you have gone out? Would you have gone out with
I don't
Moshe?
think I would. Well, it's no different than today. Pardon me.
No, if there was a Moshe today,
so today, I think about this a lot, because what keeps us from leaving the United States, or wherever, today, from coming here? Because it's the same thing.
Except for one thing, we have no Moshe Rabbeinu. Today we have no Moshe Rabbeinu. If there was a Moshe Rabbeinu today, and you knew that it was him, he's doing the miracle. Let's say he went to Obama and said, "Let my people go."
But maybe 80% of us weren't sure that Moshe was Moshe. Maybe
look at the miracles. Look at the miracles taking place.
Well,
that's true.
Sure,
it's true. But look at the miracles taking place, and there's certainly significant reason to believe. And anyhow, you're a slave, and someone promises you freedom. For the most part, I think slaves basically go. They take off. They don't want to stay behind.
If you've been in slavery for 200 years, you don't want anything else.
So certainly,
but slavery.
I think. The desert did have its problems. No question. Going to the desert wasn't a very appealing option, especially since you're not taking any provisions with you. It was a big step. It was a big risk to go to the midbar, but still, it's hard to say. But the question, it's more likely a question than not a question that 4/5 would choose to stay behind in Mitzrayim. And the question is why they would do that.
So it seems, forgive me, I'm new to all this, but that we started selling water at the first plague. The beating stopped. The water was not drinkable in Mitzrayim, but it was drinkable in Goshen. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we had the water. They didn't have the water. So maybe we started selling water. Who knows what, okay? And all of a sudden we started making business. And business was good. Slavery was stopped.
The truth is we didn't have freedom until 6 months later. We were still going to work for the first 6 months.
Oh, were we? Okay,
yeah,
I did not know that. Okay.
Until the following Rosh, the place began in Nisan, and until Rosh Hashanah of that year, we were still showing up for work. Yeah. So it was a nice idea selling water, but it wasn't possible at that point in time. But the point is that
that's kind of good business.
Yeah, exactly. But always, that's the Jews, turn slavery into a money-making business.
Well, today in the U.S., many people say they wouldn't come here because business is good there. They're sitting in South Africa.
You're still not going to come here when business is bad. You'll see. Yeah. But the question let's just deal with right now is why would the 4/5 choose? Why would they? Even if they don't choose to stay, but but choose not to go out. What was holding them back? Because it could be that they were fence-sitting. It could be not that they were planning to stay, which would make a lot of sense because who wanted to stay behind? Could be they simply just weren't excited about leaving. So nishta here, they're basically stuck between two realities. But God, that was unacceptable. God took them out of the picture because In the 10th plague, God was going to do it himself, which means there was no free will anymore. So you had to make a choice. Life comes down to choices. It all comes down to bechir, free will. In fact, the lesson says that we're still in exile to this very day because we never chose Gula. In the last 3,000 some odd years, going back to Mitzrayim, we have never actually chosen redemption as a nation as of yet. It's amazing. We've chosen a lot of other things in the past, but not that specific thing. We're still not choosing it for whatever reason. So what happened to the 4/5? So basically, plague comes along, and Egypt seems to be humbled, and Paro comes along and throws it right back in their face. He turns the rest of the water into blood. Never quite understood that technique and that reason, because you should have water, and why turn the rest of the water into blood? But anyhow, somehow that made his point that this could be magic, not necessarily the hand of Hashem, because that's what the whole struggle was about. So then they come along and they do the frogs, right? And Paro also brings frogs as well. By the kinim, it's too small. So the Chartumim say this is the finger of God. They begrudgingly, they won't say the hand of God. That's too much, right? But the finger of God, they'll point that out, right? And say, oh, good, now we're rolling, right? Now Paro and the Mitzrayim, they're opening up. They're seeing the truth. They realize that God runs the world. Mi Hashem, this is Hashem, right? Up until now was Elohim in your mind. Now you're finding out about Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Let's go. No, we're not going yet. Okay, so now you got used to this new idea. So let's bring another plague, right? You bring Avar, Aruv and Dever and all these makkahs, but Paro's still hanging in there. The Mitzrayim are still hanging in there. It's 8 plagues later, right? We're pulling things out of our bag and our arsenal, doing more and more plagues, and we're still here. And Paro's still stubborn and still holding back, and the Mitzrayim are still, they're suffering terribly, but they're still going about their business, and we, our status has changed as much as we're not going to work, but it's like we're not leaving. Like there's no magic carpet over here, there's no boat, Moshe's still showing up at Paro's palace, still making the threats and all that. I mean, Moshe probably told them, I don't know if Moshe told them or not, maybe he didn't, that only by the 10th, God told Moshe, the 10th plague will be the key to the lock to get out. I don't know if Moshe told the rest of the Jewish people. So they're all winning plague after plague after plague. At some point in time, they think to themselves, well, who says the 9th plague will be the one we go out? Who says the 10th plague? We could be here for years doing plague after plague. And yes, systematically Egypt will be destroyed and eventually fall apart. Mamela will go out because there'll be nothing left anymore. But, who wants to wait? It's like, this is schlepping on already for about a year. And we haven't gone out. We're still here. So how do we know what Moshe is doing is actually going to lead to the redemption? At some point in time, people just give up. They have yeush. And forget, I'm going back, call me. Anything exciting happens, call me, right? I'll read with the newspapers, anything changes, let me know. In the meantime, I've had enough of this, I've raised my hopes, they've been dashed, raised my hope, they've been dashed, raised my hope, they've been dashed. How many times can my hopes go up and then be brought right back down again? Enough is enough. We're going back to work, we don't know what's going to be in the end. Call us if the redemption actually happens to occur. So God says, no, that's not where you're supposed to be holding right now. And they get taken out in the 9th plague. Because they couldn't see the end coming. They couldn't see the end coming. And this is the question. You go in Spain. Just imagine, if Yaakov Avinu had been able to give over the information that he had planned to give over, we would have seen the Romans coming. We would have seen exactly what the Romans were going to do and how to avoid the situation and maybe bring the redemption. We would have seen the Spaniards coming. We would have seen the Inquisition coming. We would have been able to detect. This is an Achros Yamim type of a thing. What's going on right now, this is like an end of days type of thing. We should be doing X, Y, and Z, maybe perhaps moving to Eretz Yisrael, whatever the case, we should be doing something, or talking about it, or planning for it. Because Baruch Hu wants something from us, from all of this. Or, you can look at it and say, maybe it's just a terrible time in history. Not really Achros Yamim, and this is not going to the redemption. So therefore, we just hunker down and just protect ourselves and just wait for things to pass. Oh, it's much worse than we thought it was going to be. What are we going to do, right? If Yaakov Avinu had been able to give over what he planned to give over in this week's parsha, when we would have seen Hitler rise in power, had history gone on that long, right? Had it gone on that long, and his Yamach Shmu B'Zichro, Hitler was able to rise in power, we would have said, this is what Yaakov was talking about. He warned us about things like this. This is an Achros Yamin type of a thing. Start packing your bags. Start thinking differently. Start thinking, end of exile. People would have stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, the end of the exile has finally approached, has appeared. Let us now deal with the situation as if it's coming to a conclusion. if Yaakov had been able to reveal what he had planned to reveal. In the end, because he didn't reveal what he planned to reveal, the words, the exile is over, has never been spoken in advance. Only after the fact.
So you're saying that that's why today 4/5 of Chutz La'aretz Jews are not going to make it?
They're not going to make it, but I'll tell you that's why they're not looking at the situation today as if it demands any kind of serious response in terms of thinking about leaving.
I'm saying because of how Yaakov handled it, how it was handled with Yaakov.
Not he handled it, how we handled it. Yaakov was all prepared to give it over. Yaakov was there. He prepared himself, knew exactly what he wanted to say. Right? But the reality was that we weren't ready to hear it.
Which is the same thing today. Therefore, what has changed now 3,000 years later?
Not much really.
Not much.
But this is now you can understand and appreciate what the Marsha says.
So when you're saying that had Yaakov been able to reveal the nature of the case, the nature of the end, right? Achos Yomim, then that would have become the paradigm for all future history. We would have been able to recognize it, and we would have willingly complied with the information.
Exactly.
Okay, now then I have a question. Right? Fact remains that why was it that at the eighth play, what was it? The Machas Choshech was
nine.
Machas Choshech was. Why was it there that 80% did not get out? In other words, 80%. There was a massive Holocaust. 80%, according to the Midrash, it was a massive Holocaust at that point. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his Rachamim, happened to do away with 80% of the Jewish nation. What was it about those people that they didn't leave, but the remainder of the 20% did go out? What was the difference?
One thing and one thing only. They didn't believe in the case. They didn't believe the end was coming.
So what you're saying is, theoretically then, the ones that did not get out, they philosophically didn't believe a case was going to arrive?
I don't, philosophically they did believe. Hashkachically.
But they didn't believe it was there.
They didn't believe it was coming up was the end. They gave up on the end. Maybe at some point in time, yes, but not right now. We're not about to go on. And they began to live their lives as if they would be there for a lot longer. They were no longer thinking Kates anymore, if they were in the first place, but they certainly weren't at this point anymore. 80% basically gave up on the idea because after a year of going through the Makos and seeing nothing happen concrete that was really leading towards by the 10th plague everything turns around very fast because Akash Baruch himself does it and Paro is completely humble. But by the 8th plague, Paro reneges. Right, he relents. He comes back and says, "I made a mistake." And you're not going anywhere because this is whatever. We're not letting you out.
But you got to remember though, there was a dual reality going on here. The dual reality was, as you mentioned, as Paro became more and more recalcitrant, became more and more stubborn as a result of that. That must have had an effect on the Jews who decided that the case was not arriving.
That's what I'm saying.
So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the one that was creating the recalcitrance of Paro. He was the one that was forcing him on Paro. At the same time, he wanted the Jews to go, to choose to go out. But they, you see what I'm saying? He was more or less putting a stumbling block in their hands because the more resistant Paro became, the less hope that they ever had that they were going to get out.
We have another word for stumbling block in this situation. It's called Nasoyim. It's called Nasoyim. Right? Because Baruch Hu creates stumbling blocks. The Satan is called the Satan because he's the opposer. He's the obstruction. He exists to prove to you where you're holding, to bring out of you where you're actually holding. Right? So they had a whole year to prepare, and actually more than that. But certainly the last 8 months, as the plagues were happening, they were supposed to prepare themselves, for the sake of Gula. And that's really what the point we're getting. The point is now sort of gets towards the answer. The reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the prophecy away from Yaakov Avinu, not just because of the fact that the brothers weren't holding the proper level of the Shema with all 25 letters, right? But because it's cheating. You have to create the prophecy for yourself. That's what every Jew has to do. You have to, because basically that means you could be somebody who's not see peacefully Yeshua. There's 6 things they ask you on Yom Adin, right? That you try to have children, that you deal honestly in business, that you learn, to set aside time learn Torah, did you learn, did you pilpul, all these things. And one of the things that they ask you in this set of 6 things is see peacefully Yeshua. Did you anticipate the redemption? Rabbi Cheskel Levenstein, right, the famous mashgiach of both Panovich and Mir Yeshiva, and the Mir Yeshiva post World War II, and the Mir Yeshiva pre World War II, is talking to Panovich in the 60s, right? So this is recorded in a sefer in Mudas Agula from Ohr Yechezkel, right? And he brings down. He's talking to them. He's saying to them. He says, the mitzvah of Tzapis Yeshua, where does it come from? What's the source of that mitzvah? They're going to ask you on Yom Adin, did you anticipate the redemption? Did you live with the reality of redemption? They're going to ask you that question. Did you do that? Right? What does it mean? Not like did you, just write it down in a sefer one day or read about it in a book. Like, was this forefront on your mind? Calls man that you're in exile. Were you thinking about redemption and planning for redemption? That's your job. They're going to ask you that question, right? He said, what's the shorish of that? Where's that mitzvah come from? So he says the Sefer Mitzvahs HaKatan, right, the Smak, brings down that the shorish of that mitzvah is Anochi Shem Lokecha, the first of the 10 commandments. That's a phenomenal chiddush. Why? Because the first of the 10 commandments mentions, I'm the Lord your God. It doesn't stop there. It could stop there, because that would be enough. Who cares when it comes up to that? I'm the Lord your God. I'm your God. Period. End of discussion. I made you. The world belongs to me. I don't need to justify why I'm your God. But however, I am going to justify, or at least explain to you what the connection over here is, because I took you out of Mitzrayim. I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Mitzrayim. Okay, yeah. There's a certain relationship now, because of course the Tov and penancy, because it wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for that. But the Smak says that this mitzvah means that just like you have to believe that I'm the one who took you out of Mitzrayim and saved you, this mitzvah includes that you have to also believe I'm going to save you and redeem you a second time. That's what the mitzvah, Anochi Shem Lokecha, Asher Mitzrayim, means. That's the shorish of the mitzvah as to peace Yeshua, says Rav Chesed Levenstein. So therefore, anybody who's not Mitzapeh Yeshua is not anticipating the redemption, thinking about it and planning for it, it's forefront on their mind, whether you're living here or living there, right? It's the same thing in that respect, right? To always be looking forward to the redemption. He says you're not doing the mitzvah, the first of the Sefer Dibros properly. He says basically you have almost no faith. He said the mitzvah includes also, acknowledging that God's the creator of the world and He controls the world above and below. He says we talk about that sometimes. He says about Mashiach we don't talk about it at all. It's key we're embarrassed. And he says, and anybody who doesn't, it's like you have no faith at all. That's what he says. And he says, furthermore, that we mention Geul and davening, 4 or 5 times, different forms, different languages. He says, if you're not thinking about this and talking about it, and it's forefront in your way of thinking, your tefillah basically is lip service. Because you're mentioning Geul in your davening, and it's not part of your life. So you're not real. You're not real with any of this thing, he says. And he's talking to Panovich in the 60s. This is the cream of the crop of the Jewish people, the Torah world, back in the 60s, before all this materialism invaded our lifestyle as it is today. And we became so embedded financially as we are right now in the Western world. And that's what he's saying back then. And that's a phenomenal thing, because basically what he's telling us is that who connects with the mitzvah of Tzapis Yeshua with the Anochi Lokecha? Who thinks about the mitzvah of anticipating redemption and planning for it, and it's being forefront in your mind that this is part of the mitzvah of believing that God, is your God, and you're to be totally loyal to Him? Who thinks about it in those terms? But the Smak says it specifically, clearly, right there. So that means basically that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying you should be somebody who should be able to look at history and say, this is Achrus Yamin. This has got to be an Achros Yamim type of event. You should be sensitive to be able to say, this wouldn't be happening right now if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't actively involved in history, trying to bring the exile to an end and prepare us for the final redemption. That's why Yaakov was held back from giving that prophecy. Because if he has to give it, then you're missing something from the big picture. Somehow there's a disconnect over here between you and the long-term national goals of the Jewish people. You can keep Shabbos, Kashrus, Taras, Mishpachas, do all these things, but there's still one thing. There's a thread that unites all the Jewish people through all of history. And interesting enough, it's not always the Torah. Because you take a look at Ramat Beit Shemesh right now. What's going over there. Take a look what's happened in communities all around the Jewish, the world. Torah very often divides us, pushes us, away from each other. All the distinctions that we have because of Torah and Halacha, right? But what unites us? The long-term national longing of the Jewish people. And the Holocaust made this point so blatant. Because in the Holocaust, everything got taken away from us. All the differences, not just the physical differences, even the mitzvahs, even the Torah was taken away from us. Okay, people knew things off Baal Peh, they tried to prevent tefillin, everything was taken. There was only one thing uniting us in the Holocaust at that time of history, and around the world for that matter, was somehow the thread of Jewish history, survival, getting to the end. Somehow we're going to outlive this entire thing. Because that's what Klal Yisrael is all about. Yeah.
If Yaakov would have looked at kids, what about our free will?
Well, not necessarily, not right away, and not completely. Why we lose our free will? We lose an aspect. That's what I'm saying. We lose certainly an aspect of it, but not completely.
You know when it's coming, how it's coming.
To know when, for sure, could change a lot. If you knew the final day for sure, but even still, there's always the possibility that there's always the doubt aspect of it.
What about the Nevi'im that came and told us, and then we shot them, and we said, "Listen, we don't want to hear it. Come on, they shoot them in. It comes with the."
He was. If you look at the wording, of the pasuk itself, he says, "Let me tell you what's going to happen to you." In Achros Yamim, it doesn't actually say, "Let me tell you the date of Mashiach's arrival." It doesn't say that. He says, "Let me tell you what's going to happen to you," meaning that let me tell you what history is going to look like at the time that history is coming to an end. So you see, even today, right now in the world, it does reduce free will. There's no question about that because things become more obvious. When I first began talking about these type of ideas about 15, 20 years ago, it was an uphill battle, if I could talk about it at all, because people didn't want to hear about it, right? So then they drove two commercial planes into the World Trade Center, and the whole world changes too. All of a sudden, before 2001, I was invited to speak in places and then told, don't talk about those things. This you can talk about, right? Internet, but don't talk about about the end of days. I was invited back specifically after 2001 to speak about those things specifically, because now people had questions because it changed, and it took that event. But the truth is, what the Twin Towers brought out in the Jewish people should have always been there. What the Holocaust brought out, the national longing. For example, people talk about how, but when the Holocaust took place, we also thought it was going to be a Muslim Mashiach at that time, and Mashiach didn't come. Well, you know why? Because if you had thought this before the Holocaust happened, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened probably, and Mashiach would have come. But the fact the Holocaust had to bring it out in you didn't achieve that. You didn't earn that. It created the reality. It forced the issue for you. So the thing is that the fact that Yaakov would reveal it, it would have reduced to some degree. But even if
the end of days, the end of freedom of choice.
Once we cross that threshold, once you get into the end of days, you actually get, you go past the threshold of the war of Gog and Magog, and now all evil's gone, and Mashiach is clearly Mashiach, and God is clearly, then Bechir is gone, basically. But to get to that point...
Is he going to give us an exact schedule?
According to some opinions, yes.
If he was going to give us an exact schedule, then I would say that perhaps our free would have been taken away from us.
Well, I'll just tell you what. I'll just say one thing.
Theoretically, I think maybe he was going to give us an awareness, a consciousness of what we had to look for.
Well, that's what we're saying here. But I'll just tell you one thing for sure that I've seen. I've noticed with myself, other people as well. That the fact that you can know, there's two aspects to a human being. There's the goof and there's the neshama. And the amazing thing is that the neshama can know things and the goof can ignore completely. It's amazing how we can still maintain free will in light of knowing the answers to the questions, in spite of all that, until it becomes a reality. The same way, for example, that, as Hitler rose in power and he was going all across Europe, people still lived in denial. Right? They still lived in denial. Just like in Mitzrayim, they were able to fool themselves into believing it would never touch them. Even though there's a strong belief and it was clear that was going to happen, the reality was that people still found a way to justify not moving, not running, not leaving behind other property, because that's the way the Yetzer Hara works. Until you have fully integrated the knowledge of something. The same way, for example, say a person becomes a Chozer B'Tshuva, right? And, he goes to a shir, he goes to a class, and the rabbi speaks and he says, this is emes. I'm going to keep kashrus from this point onward. And he goes out and he's walking by a treif restaurant, he's hungry, and he's still, just last week he was sitting there, he can still taste the hamburger, the cheeseburger, he's walking by, and what does he do? He goes in. He says, next week I'll start. He knows the truth right now, but it's not integrated yet. To know the truth is one thing, to actually integrate the information is something altogether different. I guarantee you that had Yaakov revealed it, let's say, okay, and passed it on, at some point in time, people would have said, how do we know that's what he said? How do we know he actually said that? Or said it like that? Maybe he meant this instead. Because you know something? It's amazing. When life becomes comfortable, for example, in Spain or in America, and somehow, things are happening, and let's say Yaakov said something that, when a black president comes to power for the first time, that will be your sign, it's time to go back to Israel. Right? Let's say, because it's like, and he's Islamic, somewhat, and he's got a name like it, and that's your sign, right? And it happens. You know what's going to happen? People are going to say, someone made that up. It's not true. Right? Even though in the back of their mind, they're thinking to themselves, gee, I used to always believe in that idea, and now it's come from, and other people will say it's true, and they'll pick up and they'll leave, just like it's happening today. There are people today who look at the situation of the world and they say, I got to get out. When 2001, the Twin Towers were attacked, people started making plans at that, not a lot, but some people began to make plans at that time. We have to get out of here. I'm not going to sit around and wait to see how it's going to go from this point onward. And the rest of the people basically said, yeah, it's a major turning point, but who says it's an end of days type of event? And that's the whole machlokas today.
In terms of Yaakov actually saying the time, question: do you really think it would have helped? That's the first question. Secondly, if you look at Yaakov's life, okay, and how he lived in Chutz La'aretz, because Yaakov is the paradigm of how we're supposed to live in Chutz La'aretz, right, and ultimately, come to Eretz Israel and move toward the Gula, right? So when Yaakov was in Chutz La'aretz, when he was trying to teach us how to live there, in other words, when he was with Lavan and being with Lavan, and when Yosef was born to him, and he realizes when Yosef is born, it says he knew immediately that he had the armaments necessary to contend with Esau. He didn't go yet. He didn't leave. Right. Did not leave. Okay? Why didn't he leave? All right? Could you say that God didn't tell him? God didn't appear to him at that time.
Right. Well, there's no anti-Semitism.
No, but so the point remains that since there was no anti-Semitism, okay, like you're suggesting, but don't forget, if you back up, Yaakov had the security and the promise of God. I'm going to go with you and I'm going to be with you. Okay? And I'm going to take you out also. Correct? But at that point, he didn't take him out, right? Because essentially it wasn't the time yet.
Exactly.
Wasn't the time, right?
And
but when was the time? When was the time? The time was when the face of love.
Exactly. So that's exactly the point. That's a simon. It's a simon that the case has come to an end.
But he was sensitive to that, correct?
Right.
He was so super sensitive to the Shekhinah that he recognizes what is the simon that we have to understand that it's time to leave in the situation that we are. It's when these particular facts occur. Exactly. So the fact of him saying, articulating something that his whole life was a paradigm of, what's the point? If we can't see it from the history of what he was, what difference is it going to make what he says to us? We're still not going to listen, correct?
Right. And that's the reason why the Torah doesn't reveal it. Because there's times when the Torah can portray a message by telling it directly, and there's times the Torah portrays a message by not telling it at all, by holding back. And that forces you, because here we are talking about this. If Yaakov had been able to reveal information, I don't know how much of a shir we'd make out of it.
Where's the schar?
Forget about the schar, but just every, the schar comes from getting to a point where you're sensitive to that information. In other words, what makes me unique as a Jew is not the information itself. For example, the Torah gives all kinds of messages. You watch two people put on tefillin in the morning. Two people put on tefillin in the morning. Same Torah, same mitzvah, same information. One guy stands there and Baruch atah Hashem Elokim. The other guy's almost like almost talking, as he's putting on tefillin. What happened? What's the difference? Why does one guy do it like this? And they both have time. No one's rushing. The exact same situation, exact same kolel, exact same pay. They can go home at the exact same time. Just one person finds it, very, very uplifting to put on tefillin. One person finds it simply a kind of a burden, right? So what's the unique difference between one person and the next person is the level of sensitivity, spiritual sensitivity, which you build. You build that. The Torah doesn't give it to you. You have to build that, right? The reason why Yaakov was able, and this is another point that's coming out over here, right? Would you have seen Yaakov, if Lavan smiled a little bit less, would that have told you to go home? Right? Imagine it today.
Not if Yaakov didn't give me that as a piece of information.
But even if Yaakov had said that to you, you know what would have happened to people? I didn't see him smile differently today. I don't know if that's what really happened over here. You saw it? I didn't really see that. Why? Because I have a nice house, and I have a nice chariot, right? And I have a nice, job over here, and I don't want to leave yet, right? So I need Lavan not to smile the wrong way, so I can stay a little bit longer. But and this is what makes Yaakov unique. Since Yaakov went into Galus always with the desire to come back home. He lived to come back home. He was there for 20 years, but never lost his desire to come back home. That's why he was sensitive when Lavan and first of all his brothers-in-law, they spoke Lashon Hara and they spoke, the wrong thing, right? And accused him of taking their father's money, even though they owed their lives to him. And when Lavan didn't smile exactly the same, that's a very, very high level of sensitivity. To know that, to bank on that, the Shekhinah is leaving, and to leave at a moment's notice and not even say goodbye. Yeah, right after that. But first, he recognized it. Immediately after he recognized it, then Hashem came and said, yep, it's time to go home. Not first. First, he had to recognize it. This is a very, very important fundamental point that we have to be clear about. We have to be totally, totally clear about. Why? Because it really, it runs in the face of what's going into there. Why? Because basically, we're always stuck. We're always staying in exile too long. We always overstay our welcome. But is it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu just basically springs it upon us, and we can't recognize what's going on, and therefore we get trapped against our best devices? Or is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does send Simani the entire time, but we don't pick him up? We don't pick him up.
But there was a group that went out early.
Yes.
And so maybe part of the reason we stayed was, well, wait, it's not.
They suffered almost in a sense from the reverse problem. They were oversensitive.
Right.
You got to balance it out. But that's all part. It's all part of the process. You're right. There's you have to be balanced and get it from both sides.
I mean, we get here and we see this group went out a few years earlier and they got annihilated.
Yeah.
They calculated whatever they calculated. It's time to go. And
Yeah.
they got.
But Moshe said, "Don't go." They did have leadership.
Is that right?
Yeah. Moshe said, "Don't go. You're not going to be successful. It's not the time to go."
They were told, "Don't go. You're not going to be successful."
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I didn't realize.
But anyhow, this.
No, you were talking about Friday.
No, Friday. Yeah, no, they were okay. And by the way, they come back later on. They go to Eretz Yisrael. They come back in the Valley of Dry Bones. They're the ones Yechezkel brings back and they go to Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, I heard that.
But it's a little bit longer. But no, you're right. You have to have all the it can't be oversensitive and you can't be undersensitive. You have to be exactly the right amount, which is what we spend all of our time trying to do, trying to become. But the Marsha says that the Gemara in Gittin, the very famous Gemara in Gittin, which we've spoken about before in the past, but this is where it really plugs in.
and that is that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he finally was able to get out of the old city and go and speak to Vespasian, and try to deal for the future of the Jewish people. So, the whole thing with the boots and all that. Finally, he gave him three wishes, three requests. And he chose a doctor for Rav Tzadok. He chose that the family line of Gamliel, the Nasi, shouldn't be wiped away, and that he should get Yavne. So that the Sanhedrin, the Jewish people, could go to Yavne and continue on Torah after Yerushalayim was destroyed. So the Gemara asked the question, why did he ask for Yerushalayim? Why did he ask for the base of Mikdash? It was still standing. So the Gemara says, no, tefasta ruba lo tefasta. He was worried if he asked for too much, he will get nothing. But you're talking about the base of Mikdash in Yerushalayim, it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. So the Gemara, which is maybe why Rabbi Kiva comes back and brings a pasuk from Yeshaya, says that Baruch Hu turns the knowledge, the chachma of the chachamim backwards sometimes, which really stares in the whole concept of emunus chachamim. Because the whole reason emunus chachamim works is because God does not play games with the chachma of the gedolim and our leaders to make the wrong decisions on our behalf. So the Marsha, interesting enough, Rashi says nothing, Tosha says nothing, most Rishonim say nothing, but the Marsha does say something, and it's very important something. And he explains, and the truth is, it's actually Gemara in Brochas, on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, Lech Red, and Moshe's on the Har Sinai, and the Erev Rabbah is doing their thing. Because Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, go down from this mount because you're only up here because of them. And if they're not going to listen to you, they're going to do the wrong thing, you have no business being up here. You're a great guy, you're a tzaddik, you've accomplished what you've accomplished, your chelik in the work to come is unbelievable, but you're here on top of Har Sinai talking to me right now because of them. If they're not, with the program, then you have no business being up here right now. I can talk to you down there too, right? So, and Moshe goes down to fix the situation. So Marsha says, and this is a phenomenally important point that everybody has to hear and learn this very, very well. Because if you're sitting in Chutz La'aretz waiting to hear the words of Gedoli, the exile has come to an end, let us now go, you're not going to hear it. You're not going to hear it. Forget it. We didn't hear it in Europe. We didn't hear it in Spain, because you're not going to hear it. You know why? Not because the Gedolim know it and they're not telling it to you. Not because the Gedolim are out of touch with the Dibur Hashem. No. These are the Gedolim. Because Baruch Hu, Ibnus Chachamim says that Baruch Hu is always in touch with them and leading them and directing them and guiding them, except there's a very important prat. They're there for us. They're there to lead us. And therefore, just like Nevuah was taken away from the Nevi'im when people, not because the Nevi'im stopped being Nevi'im, not because Hashem said, man, there's no one to talk to anymore. Right? These people are at such a low level, like they can't find a Navi anywhere, Anyone, Navi, No, they were Nevi'im. They were great people who were Rui of Nevuah. Because we see by Hillel also, and Shmuel Kat, the Gemara says there was a baskol, that these people were Rui to receive Nevuah, but the generation wasn't Rui to have them receive Nevuah in the end. So therefore it was denied them. So therefore the Marsha says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did not know to ask, to think this, to ask the question, because the people in Yerushalayim were not worthy of being saved. And the Jewish people were not worthy of having the base of Mikdash. They themselves weren't on a level of hearing. God's always talking to us. The question is, are we always hearing Him? Are we always listening? It's always the listening. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. It's not the problem is not the transponder sending the signal out. The problem is the receiver. There's radio waves right now in this room. I can prove it to you. Turn the radio on, and you'll get radio. Can you hear it right now? No, because my ears can't pick it up. Right? Without a radio to pick up the signal's there. Right now, there's klita for your cell phone. Can you feel it right now? No. Because your body's not made to feel things like that, but the phone is. Because Baruch Hu's always talking to the world, to the Jewish people. They don't want to hear. We don't want to hear. People don't want to hear. The exile has come to an end. For the longest time, we've been having a great time. We don't want, in the Holocaust, eventually people want the exile to come to because it was so terrible. But right, the last 40, 50 years has been quite pleasant. It's still quite pleasant. And even if it's not so pleasant, it doesn't make a difference because we have houses. And it's not so pleasant. There's like things to be worried about right now, living in North America and living in Europe and living in England. But I've got a house and I can't pick up the house and simply yank it out of the ground and put it someplace in Israel. And I've got investments. I've got bank accounts. It's not so simple. I'm prepared to suffer and to live with a certain amount of fear to maintain these things. I don't want to hear the words, the exile is coming to an end, or the exile has come to an end, it's time to move on. I don't want to hear those words. So therefore, Kodesh Baruch Hu says that he won't. And it's not going to be my problem. Like Yosef's brothers say to God, right? Don't tell Yaakov we sold him. Don't tell Yaakov we sold Yosef. God says, fine, I won't. It's a problem for me. It's a problem for you. If you'd let me tell Yaakov that you sold Yosef, we could fix this thing right now and not go all through 20 years of suffering you're about to endure. But you want me to keep my mouth closed and not tell Yaakov? Fine, I'll keep my mouth closed and see who that serves in the end. You don't want to hear the words, the exiles come to an end? Fine. So you want to hear the words, the exiles come to an end. But see who that serves in the end. Me or you. And that's what Yaakov was hoping to avoid. That's what Yaakov, he wanted to give us a simanim. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no. Either you're somebody who can see those simanim on your own because you spent your life, the quiet moments, sensitizing yourself, anticipating redemption. You're tied into the national goals of the Jewish people. Either you're a person like that, and therefore you will see what Yaakov is trying to give over on your own, and therefore get the schar for it, and respond to it, or you won't, and you'll be trapped.
But it's always there to be seen if we want to see it.
That's what we're saying.
All we have to do is look for it.
It's more than just look for it. You have to be, you can't look, just look, you can't, don't fix what's not broke. Likewise, you can't see what's not missing from your vision if you think it's not missing from your vision. The whole hashkafa, the whole training, the whole educational system, all of Yiddishkeit, it leads to a specific moment in history. We've been building towards it, and we've lost track. We just stopped thinking. We just thought to ourselves as long as we have a base Knesset, we have a base Medrash, we have we got a Sefer Torah in the Arna Kodesh, we got Chumashim and Gemaras, we got Rabbis and Shirim and Beis Yaakov and Yeshivas. As long as we have all of that, the world will always be a cheery, rosy place. So why hasn't it been? Because that's just the means to an end. That's like building a staircase with no upper floor. What's the point? Yeah, you could do it. Fine, go up and down the staircase. Basically, at some point in time, it'd be nice to get to another level, right? So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, there's no Beis Hamikdash, folks, and there's no Shechina in the Beis Hamikdash. So that's why these things like what goes on in Mount Shemesh right now, which is getting international coverage, what happens in America to Jews, what's the situation getting worse, what's the answer? Like, why is this happening? What's the answer? Like, we know how to explain this stuff. The truth is, there really is not much of an answer, except one. That's what it means to live in exile. You forgot? You're in exile? Let me remind you. The insanity, the infighting, the scandals, this thing, that thing, all of it is just to remind you you're living in exile. Now go start planning for the redemption. Think about that. And that's what Yaakov says. His whole focus, it's amazing. His whole life has come down to this one little itty-bitty parsha where he says, let me tell you, as I'm about to die and leave this world, there's so much I could teach to you, teach you and give over to you and pass on, but let me pass on this. Here's what's going to happen at Achros Yomim. Why? Because my whole focus is Gula. That's what my whole sensitivity, all I've been doing up until now is just trying to bring the redemption. The Gra held that Avraham Avinu in his time was Mashiach and Yosef, Yitzchak in his time was Mashiach and Yosef, Yaakov in his time was Mashiach and Yosef. The whole focus was Gula, Geula, Geula. Because of that, he had the sensitivity to be able to get out of Lavan's place while it was still said to do so. Not the Jewish people. They go down to sojourn. Sojourn means there probably was a moment in time they could have left safely, and they didn't catch it. It came and it went. We got stuck. We got burned. All through history, it's the exact same thing, and it's happening all over again right now. Because people just don't know how to recognize when exile is coming to an end. Yaakov tried to spare us that, because Baruch Hu said, that's going too far. I will give them the keys. If they will take the time to sensitize themselves and be real with the concept of Gula, they on their own will be able to recognize it and respond appropriately. So the Zohar says that at some point in time, it will become so clear that even a Tinuk Shabbat Ramban, a child, will say, this is redemption. This is the Gula. But if it gets to a point where a child has to be able to say it, chances are it's already way down the road. You don't want to bring it to a situation like that. We have to do it on our own. To sensitize ourselves, put into it, and then all of a sudden, because Baruch opens our eyes and we see things uniquely different, and we're able to do what has to be done in advance of the crisis and not through the crisis. Because the Gula will always either come because of us or through us. When it's because of us, it's because we've done the right thing. Through us means it comes through all the difficult times the Jewish people have endured up until now, and God forbid, may have to endure in the future as well.